The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately the man regained his sight and followed Jesus on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So there was this farming community that was experiencing a severe drought. So the pastor of the community decided to call upon all the townspeople and asking them to pray for rain. And the pastor specifically asked people to bring something, an article of faith that represented their faith. So as you can imagine, some people, brought their rosaries, some people brought their crucifix, some people brought statues of Our Lady, big statues in the procession, statue of Saint Anthony, statue of Saint Joseph. And then there was one girl who brought an umbrella. And all the eyes were upon her. And the pastor went over to her and said, "You see, everybody brought something religious, but why did you bring an umbrella?" And her answer was, "Well, when God sends down the rain, I don't want to get wet." So out of everybody, who really had faith? There's a 17th century painting of Bartimaeus, which more or less captures this very essence of this kind of firm conviction in God and his ability to answer our prayers. So what we see is we have Bartimaeus who is just getting up and walking towards Jesus, and we can see the cloak on the ground. And what else do we see? As he's springing forward to action, walking towards Jesus, he's throwing away his walking stick. So this rightly captures that even before he was healed, he was so convinced that God was going to cure him, that he wasn't going to need the cane anymore. According to the Gospel of Mark, there are two instances where Jesus said, "Go and your faith has made you well." The first instance is when the woman who has been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years, and she said to herself, "I want to get well. And the only way for me to get well is get to Jesus, and all I have to do is just touch the fringe of his cloak and I will be made well." And sure enough, Jesus said, "Who touched me? I felt the power has gone out of me." And sure enough, that's all it took. Courage and faith is all it took for her to be healed. The same thing with the blind Bartimaeus. He shouted out, and despite the fact that people are telling him, "Shh, just be quiet. You're just a blind beggar on the street. Jesus has more important things to take care of. Just be quiet." And he shouted out even more because he was so convinced, only if Jesus will hear me, he's going to ask me to come forward and he's going to cure me. That's exactly what happened. We need to have this kind of conviction that God will listen to our prayers, that God will help us. When we are filled with doubts, when we are still holding on to the cloak or the walking stick, when we are still holding on to things, our security blankets, that gets in the way of completely trusting in God. When Jesus asked Bartimaeus to come forward and asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" What did he say? "Let me see again." So he once had a sight which was working fine, and he's lost his ability to see. If you had lost your sight, and if God regained your sight, what would you want to see first? Who would you want to see? Wouldn't you want to go see your loved ones, your family, your parents, your best friend, or places where you used to hang out, places that you used to go? And Jesus said, your faith has made you well, and go. And where did he go? He went to Jesus. He stayed with him. Back in the day when I used to be in Mississauga, we used to have a lot of weddings, over 100 weddings a year. So I was used to interviewing a lot of young people, and I'm sure once the church is built, I hear that a lot of young people are looking forward to getting married in the new church. Every time I have an interview with young people, I ask this question. I say, how did you know? How did you know that she or he was the one? Guess what the answer is? Every single time. We just knew. I just knew. She was different. He was different. I just knew that this was the one. Do you know that there's a language that our hearts understand? When we feel loved and understood, when love is pouring forth from our hearts for that particular person, we just know. Bartimaeus just knew that Jesus was the one who alone can love him like nobody else could. Isn't it funny in our life, we go through full circles. We go through life trying to fill our life with things that we think is going to make us happy until we hit a point called the midlife crisis. Midlife crisis isn't really a midlife crisis. What midlife crisis is we live our lives thinking that whatever we have to do or we like doing, if we feel like we need to please others, and if my happiness depends on other people's approval, and therefore I'm just busy making everybody else happy, and therefore neglecting myself, it gets to a point where I go, I don't want my life in this way. I'm going to go get myself a nice Corvette. I'm going to get myself a nice suit. I'm going to spend to do something for me because I've never done anything for me. Or if we feel like, you know what, if I don't have the wealth and the power, I'm just nobody. I want to fill my life with things that people will respect me because that's what life is all about. And if we live our life for things of this world, guess what? We come to a point where we feel like, I feel spiritually and morally bankrupt because nothing from this world can actually fill our hearts. And we come to a point where we recognize what we really needed is God. And the gospel today reminds us of that. Jesus said, Bartimaeus, come. In the same way, Jesus is inviting all of us to come forward, to spring into action. Let us cast aside our doubt and everything that we like to hold on to that prevents us from truly trusting in God. Let us abandon them and run towards Jesus because we all know Jesus is the one.